That's really cool. So we're gonna move on to our next hot topic, which is All Day and a Night. This is a movie also on Netflix. We talk a lot about Netflix. Hopefully we get some sponsorship from Netflix. Who knows? We talk a lot about them, but this is a movie that is on Netflix that kind of recently dropped, probably about a week or so ago. And it follows a young man who embarks on a journey of self-discovery after landing in the same prison as his father. It has some really noteworthy cast members. So these are our cast members. Ashton Sanders, he played in HBO's Native Son, Moonlight, the Academy
Equalizer
Award winner.
2.
Yes. You also have Jeffrey Wright, who starred in Westworld, Cadillac Records,
Basquiat.
so many things. Just stop. Then we have okay. Forgive me if I'm mispronouncing it wrong, but Yaha Abdul-Mateen II. He starred in Watchmen, and he's also going to be starring in Jordan Peele's new feature movie,
What was that?
Candyman. What?
Which character was that?
He was the gangster.
TQ?
The one who asked for the hit to be put out. Come
Okay,
on, man.
okay.
Let me get to the other actor. And then we got Isaiah John, who also stars in Snowfall. So, and that's a show on FX by the late great John Singleton. If you have not checked that out, make sure to check that out. Make sure to check out Watchmen on HBO. That also features Regina King, and check out Westworld if you haven't. But yeah, so I think it's
Here we go.
I have some mixed opinions about this movie. For me, don't get me wrong, I love seeing Black excellence. I love seeing
Blah,
stories about
blah,
us.
blah, blah.
But let me finish. But as I mentioned, and as we mentioned in our previous episodes, you can't support everything just because it's Black. I, unfortunately, don't like it. I'm not a fan of it. I think it's one of those movies where it was trying to do something and it missed it by like 100 yards.
Wow.
Like, I just personally just don't connect with it. I think it's also trying to ride off of and do the homage to the whole 90s, hood films or gangster films, where it's kind of like,
So no, you don't be in the streets like
the
that. That's for us to be
cycles.
in the streets. It's
Come on
not
now.
for you.
Come on.
I'm
The
joking.
cycles of, you keep interrupting me. Stop interrupting me. The cycles of like gang life and all that and trying to make it out of it. Like, I think it's trying to ride off of that. And it just was a disconnect for me. And of course, I know that I don't live that life. So, but I'm just pretty sure that a lot of these people don't say that like that or don't act like that if they really in this type of life. That's how I feel. And I just feel like it was just too much of an overarching plot of the connection between a father and son, and like you're your dad's son and I'm much like my father, to where like it was something that was so pure. That whole idea of like we pretty much grow up to be like our fathers or our mothers, where it just was like kind of dwindled. And I didn't really like it. Like, don't get me wrong, the ending where you connect the dots of like, oh, this person was this, that's pretty good. Don't get me wrong, I enjoyed that. It wasn't too bad. Because I was one of those people who I personally, was trying to figure out like, who was he to him? Who was he? And then you're like, oh, that makes sense. But for me, his reasoning behind him doing what he did was because of this person's relation to the demise of his dad was trash. I just couldn't relate to it. Don't get me wrong. Like I said, shout out to the actors, shout out to people who try to put it together. But I just feel like you were missing some things that could have really connected with the audience. Now, there's people like my mother who loved it, watched it 3 times, connected with it. She said amazing performances, great story. There's people who support it. I'm just not one of those people. I just feel like it was trying to be something and it missed it by a long shot.
I will say the performances were good. Jeffrey Wright is obviously a very good actor. Same with Ashton Sanders. Everybody else was good. I'm not going to say amazing, but those two definitely did a great job.
Isaiah John also does a very good job of acting, I'll say.
Has he been in this role before?
So he plays in Snowfall. Isaiah John, he plays in Snowfall as a very similar character to what he does in All Day and a Night. So in Snowfall, his homie, I forget the main character's name because I'm not on top of the show like some of y'all are.
Mm-hmm.
But he pretty much just have to convince he teaches his friend, even though he has no idea about being in the game, he sees it. He's never been in the game before. And so he's finally getting into the game of like, this is when crack was starting to really hit in the 80s. And so he pretty much tells us, grooms his homie into walk and talk and, how the game is supposed to look like with this part, like how you supposed to maneuver in the game. He does that in this one too. He tries to put his friend on game, like you need to get with it, how you gonna not have no hustle and all of that. And you got all this, you got baby coming, you got this coming,
Hey, I get all that. I just feel like
he wasn't bad.
He's a little bit too like clean. Like he's a little too like he didn't really seem that like ruthless. He seemed like he was kind of like, all right, anybody can take his spot. Which is why that's probably why TQ was like, yo, he not really doing this right. TQ's like his best friend, the monster in the movie. But yeah, I don't know. Everybody did a good job. That was just a little thing I thought. But anyways, I don't think to play devil's advocate, I don't think it's that bad of a film. I definitely hear your points where it's not. It's kind of recycled. A lot of it's recycled. So it's nothing like revolutionary here, nothing new here. What drives the whole story? Because like we start off like in the beginning with like the flash forward. We see like what put him in jail. You know what I'm saying? And so the whole movie, like you said, we're trying to figure out like what happened, blah blah blah. The only problem is like halfway through the movie, I forget. I stopped caring about why he ended up shooting dude. Because it's like I feel like a lot of it doesn't really matter. You know what I'm saying? Because I think what they're trying to get across is that like dude was just like he made an irrational decision. So I was talking to my friend Austin Jones. Shout out to him. Scouting video coming out soon. I told him I'd give him a shout out. But he was basically saying like, bro, I really liked the film because it was realistic. And that was like the one thing I knew going into this conversation that we were going to talk about, how like it didn't seem realistic how all that went down. But his point was the fact that like someone in that situation that would just go kill dude like that is probably not a rational thinker to begin with, right? So you look at the whole story, what was he doing with his life? Like, yeah, he was rapping. He really wasn't
doing nothing.
Wasn't really pushing the raps. His one friend, so like he had his two friends. One represented like someone that makes all the right decisions. That's Lamarck.
And still gets screwed.
Yeah, his other friend TQ is the guy that makes all the wrong decisions. And at the end of the day, they in the same spot. They both laid up in the hospital right now. You know what I'm saying?
Laid up in the hospital or dead.
One's in prison, but yeah.
One's paralyzed, one's in prison, and one is dead.
So I mean, I get how like at the end of the day, like he just felt like there was no hope anyways. So he was kind of driven to that decision. I get that, and I think that's something that's like worth being fleshed out. I just feel like it wasn't fleshed out. For one, those two characters are like real static. They're not dynamic. They're kind of like, this is who he is, and he has no other whatever. So TQ's a monster. He says, like, I don't care about nobody else but myself, blah, 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 blah. But it really doesn't show, like, why is he a monster? Or, like, is he always like this? Or, like, it's just like, yeah, I want to screw over everybody in this hood for this dude in this other hood. All right. Okay, that's unrealistic to begin with, in my opinion. Anyways, dudes are snakes, whatever it happens. And the other dude just joins the army, but I don't think they explain why he joined the army. I feel like somebody in his situation, especially a dude from the hood, good grades, always does the right thing. Joining the army is not
the first choice.
Second, third, fourth, fifth. Like, what? Yeah. That was random. That was weird.
Especially if he was a good kid, great grades and everything like that. And he's from the hood. Let's be honest. There are opportunities for y'all. Like there are opportunities what we would view as opportunities for kids who's from the hood.
They all kinds of green.
Colleges love the struggle story. The black kid from the hood. Then also he was a stellar student, and then he was a good kid. He didn't get into any mess. So it's just kind of like that was his only option, was to join the Air Force or the Army.
Or wherever it was. That was a little weird. So I feel like those two things, which are kind of like what sets up this character to make these decisions, were a bit shaky. But his actual decisions aren't that unrealistic. It's just like the situations around his decisions that make his decisions feel unrealistic, if that makes any sense to y'all. But so that was definitely like a complaint. Other thing too was the pressure to be his father. All right, so that's like the big thing. The pressure not to be his father, right? It's like the big thing driving this whole story. But I feel like that too was underdeveloped. You know what I'm saying? Like they would mention it and they come to these like flashbacks and stuff like that. But in the end, I feel like there should have been some kind of moment, like either where he brings it up to him or something. I get it's like an understanding, like it's kind of like a silent agreement. They both know what's going on here, but that too just kind of felt iffy. I think these kind of things like this kind of leads to an overall film that's underwhelming. I can't sit here and say it's a bad film. It's just like when you see a film that's like this before, we've seen these same things. In order for it to be a good film, I think in a lot of people's opinions, it has to be something different, something new. Whereas if you're a casual observer of the film, it's going to hit. If that makes sense.
So one thing I will say, and I think we should make this our last point so we can move on to our deep dive discussion before we dive too much in this one. Though I was not a fan of the movie, there was something I connected with, like a message I connected with throughout this movie, and that was the cycle of violence. And so I connected with the idea of the cycle of violence. It reminded me of a book by Ta-Nehisi Coates, Between the World and Me. And so in his book, he pretty much explains in a few pages, chunk of pages, that there's a cycle of violence that Black people receive and we project onto our children. And so because we struggle, we push a level of violence on our kids in hopes that they don't struggle, but they ultimately go out to the world and produce that cycle of violence onto the world in hopes that nobody inflicts that cycle of violence onto themselves. So like his father was let's be honest, his father was abusive. That's a spoiler. Yeah. His father is abusive, hands down abusive, and he's not the ideal father figure. And so you see that level of like violence and like, not being rap type, what they would say rap type, his son ultimately inherits, because it only took something quick happening for him to flip the switch on his girlfriend. It only took something quick for him to flip the switch and actually, spoiler, kill someone. So it's just kind of like,
okay, the thing with his girlfriend is pretty like, I don't know about
it's understood. We're not going to go into that. Not even going into that. It's just the message is a cycle of violence, and I think they did a good job of portraying that cycle of violence, because it's like his father inflicted a cycle of violence onto him. The world is also trying to inflict violence onto him. So his idea of reacting to this violence is to project violence onto these forms, And that's just like, it could have been wrapped even more. It just really reminded me of that book, Between Me and the World. And if you have not read the book, I highly recommend you read the book by Mr. Coates. There's some other books you should definitely check out, The Water Dancer and The Beautiful Struggle. He's also wrote like Black Panther comics and Captain Marvel comics, so check him out. But it really, if you read that book, you see this movie, you can see the lines of connection a little bit, which was really cool to me.
Before we go, like I definitely always want to mention something that have to do with the actual like craft of filmmaking. And so, you see that scene at the very end when he's like sneaking through the hood, like he's James Bond? That was ridiculous, bro. Come on, like one, it's crazy that he's like ducking behind fences, no one sees him. Like, he looks like an idiot out here. And then second of all, I feel like that was a moment where you could tell they were like, all right, we're gonna do some cinematic stuff with the
camera movement,
but they didn't do it. It was like real, like something like
it's supposed to be one of those like tracking shots. Oh my god.
Yeah, like have you seen the first season of, what's the one with Vince Vaughn and Matthew McConaughey, where they're like cops? It's the one where
True Detective
season 1. It's like episode 4 or 5. They're in like the crack house, and it's like a one shot that lasts like 2 minutes long, right? Crazy. I feel like they could have attempted something like that.
I feel like it was trying to do that, but it's just like it did not hit. It didn't hit.
Yeah, I was like, this is an obvious moment where you could have really gone stupid, and they didn't.
My last thing is also too is just like they try to play too much with subliminals to where like the subliminals like fell through. So even at the end, spoiler. Even at the end, he was like, come here, let me teach you how to. His son's like, come here, let me show you how to grow something. I'm just like,
it was too metaphorical.
They were trying to be deep because, like, low key, this is not what he did with his son. He didn't nurture his son. Like, that just wasn't something he did. Like, the level of nurture and all that he got was from his mother, if that.
You know what's funny about that? I didn't really put too much thought into that. But if you really like think about that more, the worse it looks. It was like, look, bro, he obviously doesn't have a garden or plant. He's been in jail for 3 days. So what's he talking about? So it's obviously like a joke almost. But it's not a joke. It's like a metaphor. So there's like really no reason he would have ever said that. This was like a real.
That's what I'm saying.
It's totally for subliminal purposes, like you said.
Then they ended it with that. It was just kind of like. So I was like.
Well, you know, to some people though, not to like talk trash on anybody, but there's a lot of people who saw that and was like, "Dang,
bro, I guarantee you." I hear people was like, "Pray, let me show you how to grow something." Tweeting that mug, bro. I kid you not. That was probably the last little. This movie is great.
I feel like Frank Ocean.
Great. Okay, moving on to our next cat.